Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is April 5, 2023. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Sam Saper, also known as Sam Circle. Where in the heck are you calling in from, Sam?
So my normal home base is Jersey City, but right now I'm at my parents' house outside of Baltimore for Passover, which we're doing a day late. So we'll do that tomorrow.
First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Hmm. What is the best thing for a human being? Gosh. Um, the first place that I go is to the idea of love, which I think is sort of something that you can't what's isn't there a stupid song? It's the only thing that there's not enough of. I think I almost just said that off the top of my head. I was like, no, that's already a corny song. Um, but yeah, I think love, I think water and air.
That's good. Let's go from there. Love is the answer I get the most, and I do get water often. What is your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Hmm. Um, I like some diversity in terms of that. I'm very interested in which you'll appreciate because you like McLuhan, when the form has some relation to the content that it's expressing, right? So that it's not that you're not just, I don't feel like I'm someone that always needs to tell things in the same way. Like I'm not a form first thinker. The idea suggests a form that, but I would say I like the word, and I like actual text, like text words. That might be my number one.
Did you grow up now meaning text? That's printed word or electronic word. Did you grow up a reader because your parents, one, told you to read, two, they did an example, or three, on your own?
Gosh, definitely some. So I remember when I was very little, my dad would go through the New Yorker cartoons and read them to me and explain them as best as you could. Obviously, a lot of them are just sort of absurd, which is a great sort of way to, get your kid interested in the sort of a cultural history because they're all referencing these various things that need some unpacking. And that's a format I like the synthesis of the visual and the written. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, I think there was a little bit of all of those things. I definitely think there were a lot of books around, and yeah, and I don't know if I understand the differentiation between the electronic word and the in-person word. I I think it feels a little bit different when you're a digital native. It feels like the electronic word, like they're very interconnected. Like it's
Yeah,
hard for me to conceive of them as different.
yeah, it is. I mean, very good. Do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
Huh. Um, I think I do sort of see it as innate. I think that I well, I don't know. When you say innate, I mean, I think that, you know, to some extent, I buy into that sort of Jungian idea of like, oh, it's like something that happened when you were a child. You know what I mean? Like some sort of way of processing that. And like, I think I'm interested in knowledge as a way of feeling secure in my ability to do things. And, I don't know if I would say that's innate. I think it's invented, but I think it's like it's invented before you're even aware that you're inventing. It's like very early on, these sort of primordial things that then shape us and turn into the like neuroses that we have to unpack.
Great words, Sam. Shaping was good, because a lot of these questions I asked, it's like you can't separate innate from invented, but we think we can because we invented the words. So we think the words work at separating them. So do thoughts create emotions?
I think that in psychology, there's sort of this idea that there's there's three things. There's action, emotion, and thought. I don't know if those are exactly the words that they use, and that they're sort of in a triangle where each of them impacts the other, but not wholly. And so I sort of see it that way. And I think that along with action, each of those things, there is an impact, often a large impact, but it's not the whole picture.
Very good. Fill in the blank, Sam. I don't know what I think until I.
Yeah, I would say I don't know what I think until I have a conversation with someone else. I often sort of rely on that kind of talking it out before I feel secure in the idea. But there's something interesting about working with ideas that you don't feel fully secure in. And like with poetry, for example, I think it's easy to kill a poetic idea by talking it out and by having too much communication about it. And often it's better to try to get it onto the page before you've done that, so that it has this sort of feedback, this quality of internal looping or whatever, like that it doesn't feel like a resolved system, if that makes any sense.
Made a lot of sense, because McLuhan flipped the word feedback into feed forward. So you almost said that, and you evoked Allen Ginsberg, first thought, best thought. And very good. Yeah, because McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it.
Yeah.
Can humans think without language?
I think so. I think that language, it mediates it, right? It mediates our thought. But yeah, I mean, I think so. But that's a hard one to answer it's like answering it in language. It's like, well, how would you know? Because you're answering with language, I don't know.
That's like T.S. Eliot saying, when I talk to you, I got to use words. And I was like, no, you don't. I always tell my Zoom groups, we could do this whole 2-hour Zoom with no spoken word, hand gestures, holding notes up, I mean, but people like, now, and McLuhan said conversations is sort of like the highest. So it was good what you said, but Chomsky says a language is not just words, it's culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is.
Right.
Sam, what do you do when language breaks down? When language doesn't work, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think often that can be the most fruitful stuff for art. And the stuff that most merits investigation are the places. And I think the breakdown of language is, very interesting. And I think a lot of modernism, comes from that, sort of the places where language breaks down. What do I do? I'm not sure how to answer that. I don't know. I think that I go forward, or I seek it out. I'm not sure.
Yeah. One of my favorite answers recently was group hug.
Yeah.
I love
nice.
that.
Yeah.
This stupid question, I know it's both, and we already got. Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I I think that like you said, both are present. I think that different people um view themselves, and not in the sense of like just sort of exterior identity formation, but like in a very deep way, like the inner self, um as one or the other way.
Yeah.
Or maybe I sort of see them as being, I don't know if you know about Enneagram at all. I really like
Yes.
some of that
I
stuff.
know a
And
little
so
about it. Yeah.
that part of the idea is that there's head types, heart types, and gut types. And I think that that's a fairly decent model.
Yeah. It's very good. Two questions from Alan Turing in 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Hmm. I think so, but I think souling can be a function of the thought.
Yeah, it's very good. Can machines think?
um, I think machines can I think machines can think in terms of patterns, but I think that's only one kind of thinking. I think that the kind of thinking that r goes outside of patterns, uh, I don't I haven't I don't think it exists yet in terms of, I think that is something very animal.
Yeah. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Hmm. I think that I naturally tend toward meaning, and so I have to adjust toward happiness. And that, oftentimes what is healthy, if you naturally adjust toward happiness, it may be helpful to sort of adjust your inner chronometer toward meaning.
Yeah, I got it from Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. He says meaning tends to last, happiness doesn't necessarily last.
Hmm.
Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are
Yeah,
we more creating it?
that's a hard one, huh? Um, Gosh, yeah, that's something I don't think I've really thought much about. So uh, it's hard to, like, I don't know if I can answer it intelligently. It's odd. It's like it's not. I feel like it's almost like a different model. Like my. It's a hard question to answer.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
No, and I want you to feel, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. And
No, no, no. Yeah,
the saying you can't answer something or I don't know is totally
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
But I am after a lot of these because some of them are neuroscientist or whatever kind of questions. Your hunch or your guess, but let's move on. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
um, I think the speed of thought operates outside of the kind of time that you could measure with a word like fast. So what's faster, the speed of light or apples?
That's good. Very good. Touche. That's like this woman, these questions I ask, is it more this or more that? And she goes,
Right,
the word more doesn't function in your question.
right, right.
Touche. Audre Lorde, the poet, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's
Master's
tools.
tools.
Yvonne Rainer responded to her and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Gosh. What an interesting question. Yeah. I read that little pamphlet that's titled the Can't Dismantle the Master's House. Just a little while ago. What new tool? I think a lot of the time, um, I mean, hmm, I think that community and the social world
Yeah,
offers a lot of possibilities for um, that the kind of growth and regeneration that uh, Lord is maybe talking about. And I don't know if that's a new tool, but I wonder if all the new tools are in some ways, are they just sort of different manifestations of these prior tools, right? Which
yeah.
might be furthering some of what she's talking about in terms of the harm that they're doing. And I think that connection is not, it's sort of a non-tool, and maybe that has the potential to get out of some of those loops. But yeah.
Really good, Sam, because it's me and you versus the wording on the question. So
Yeah.
because I say new, you can abandon that word and just say, what tool do you gravitate towards? So that
Right.
was good. I like community and social world. What new toy do you suggest?
Huh. Huh. Yeah. Um, what new toy? I don't know. That just makes me think of, like, I believe that children are the future. Right? That's another corny song. Like this, yeah, like what new toy, what new joy. Um, yeah, I don't, I could probably write a poem, but I don't think I can give you a straight answer.
Yeah, that was good. You said toy joy. That was beautiful. No, the new toy is joy. That's
Right.
fine.
Yeah.
What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Gosh, I try not to go to bed worried, if I can help it. Um, I I think that, yeah, uh, you know, I I I I have a lot of inner peace, and so even things that I think make a lot of sense to be worried about, like I think that obviously the climate is sort of a really big one, and all sorts of other things, injustices. Um, it's not that I am blind to those things, but it's that I can do more if I don't take it personally. And so I
Yeah,
think if you are going to bed worried, you're taking it personally.
yeah, really good. McLuhan learned from a poet that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic
Hmm.
effects of our inventions. So
Hmm.
we might be able to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Sam, I asked you the question McLuhan probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Yeah. I, I think that societies reenact what is most hidden in them. Uh, and that because of that, when you when you point and you go, look, you know what I mean, look at this, there's this defensive reaction that's very
Yeah,
common of, no, the emperor does have clothes, like, because y- I don't know.
no,
um so
that
I think that is why, because
yeah,
of this process that I think is very human of, whatever is underneath the carpet is like the thing that we're always reenacting. It saturates the air.
Yeah.
in ways that make it very difficult to point out and make plain, make clear, this is what it is, because it's everywhere, it's all around us. Yeah.
Do artists have moral obligation?
I think that what you do matters. I think that what people do matters, but I don't think that artists have a moral obligation to make moralizing art.
Yeah. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Fear is an interesting one. That's another that also sort of brings me back to like thinking about Enneagram. More afraid. I think that I think I'm most afraid of an idea that people believe to be new, but that is in fact old. I
Yeah.
think that that's the most dangerous.
Yeah. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Yes. I talked about this a lot. What is my earliest memory? I don't know why my family often brings up what's that question. There was a time when a bat flew in to the house through the window. My parents were sort of running around trying to chase it. That was my answer. And the truth is that I don't think I still necessarily have that memory as such. It's that I have the memory of, oh, that's my earliest memory. And
Yeah.
but I have details from that memory that like they're not meaningful details, but they're not details that I share or incorporate into the story. And so in that sense, it retains some of its freshness, right? Certain little sensory details where it's like I only know that in theory, like I don't actually have that memory, but I also know that it's a real memory, that it wasn't initially just a story. So that's the one that I give.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
I think it's hard to view things as curses and blessings. I don't know if that logic will get you anywhere, but I would certainly say that it's a blessing in the sense that, you know, it's a source of joy and art, and I don't know, I think it's more pleasant to view it as a blessing, and that's maybe all that matters because it's not really either, of course.
We become what we behold. Very good, Sam. So tell me someone just briefly within your immediate family and
Yeah.
then outside your immediate family who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model. And what specifically was that impact?
Yeah, gosh. I mean, so both my parents are in academia. My mom is an independent animator, and we've worked together on some projects, which was really a great experience. And then my dad is in a it's called language literacy and culture, and it's sort of it has ties to English and media and everything, and he's done stuff with film and electronic literature. And so anyway, I I take from that to some extent, and I'm interested in sort of, going into the family business of academia, which was not always the case. But um yeah, I don't know, I I tend to be attracted to um I think it's interesting how even though I feel like, oh, I'm looking for something new, I'm looking for a new idea, you still end up sort of replicating these patterns, right? And I'm not someone that sort of intentionally went into it thinking, oh, I'll emulate this or I'll emulate that from my parents, but you do. Yeah, I don't know. As far as someone outside of that, I mean, it's tricky because I think that there's the artists that are inspiring, but that's a little bit of a different question from a role model. And I think that that's a harder one. I don't know. I don't know that I am good at, like, following the dances of others. I need to at least feel like I'm making up my own dance, and then I can kind of look back and go, "Oh, here's what was going on here, was what going on
Yeah.
here." So,
We call that rooted, not retro.
mm,
You're rooted. Yeah, very good. So do you pray?
no, I consider myself an atheist and you know, but um, I'm not against uh religious or spiritual thought, but no, it's not part of my practice. I don't I lack faith.
If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I think it would be disappointing if it could be expressed in words.
Very good. He says, let's do some Enneagrams
Yeah,
together.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Definitely more so the latter. Yeah, I think that it all comes back to repression, compartmentalization, and you know, I don't see it as inherent to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And a few thoughts before. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts, Sam. It's basically, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Yeah, I think that it's not untrue, but that even if you don't acknowledge your enemy, others may acknowledge them and thereby empower them and disempower you. And so that's the you're it's there's a risk at hand there. And so it's a little bit like, well, you're not telling the whole story there. Um yeah, I think though that uh I don't know. I mean, I think it's important to recognize. I don't know. I mean, I think in practice, a lot of the time, what I do is I come up with these sort of wild stories about, oh, here's why they're acting like that, which in a way is like a way of sort of forgiving them. But it's like I intellectualize, and then I'm sort of able to, because I go, oh, they're probably dealing with, they don't they feel like they're turning into their sister, and that's causing them to react in this crazy way, and then they don't like me because this other person said this thing, and that spiraled in their mind, and I'm an embodiment of this and that. And I think that's not always the greatest strategy, but that it there's something to be said for, I don't know, that's sort of what I often turn to.
That's
I don't
pretty,
know.
no, that's
Yeah.
pretty smart. It sounds
Yeah.
like, the higher ups hiring the court jesters to tell stories or make fun of them,
Right.
so why not? There's this quote I've been dying to find, that Martin Luther did that to the devil. Somehow he made fun of him.
Yeah.
Anyways, this is the follow-up. Nassim Taleb said, games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. When I said that to someone, they said, well, villains don't think they are bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And Gregory Bateson says, if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, man, I did something morally and socially wrong. So, I mean, there's a lot of thoughts there. Go off wherever you want, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
Yeah, I think often when the criminal gets caught, they say, "I haven't been caught." I think that it's not that, you know, it's easy to, if you take a punishment and you say, "I have not been punished," you know what I mean? I think this is often what happens, is that it's not easy to cast our moral world onto another. And like it's hard, try as we might, and there's certainly a lot of that in our culture.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I think that you know, it it's it's too bad how deep all the roots are of the way that we handle uh justice. And I don't know, I don't see it as um you know especially helpful to anyone involved, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked to the producer of the Enron documentary, and I said, "Dude, your film is just a training film for up and coming capitalists. You know, you get your hand slapped and you get thrown in a country club jail." And he goes, "Yeah, I guess so." Joyce was James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?"
I think it comes back to the frame. um Life lacks a frame, and it lacks a framework, and it's hard to reckon with that. And I think ideally you can come to terms with that without just sort of picturing your life through a framework or with a frame around it, although a lot of people do that. But ideally, art can serve as a way of mediated looking in which you understand, um, oh, here's what one frame or another frame, here's what one framework or another framework might reveal. And by so doing, you become it activates your vision more fully, right? It enables you eventually to break out of whatever very simplistic frameworks culture sort of imposes on you, right? I think that maybe we're not born with frames and we're not born with frameworks, but it's certainly impossible to live without having them imposed on us and viewing things that way. No one does that, and all you can do is sort of complexify to the point of clarity. And I think that's part of what art does.
Yeah. Well done. You know, I'm sort of jealous. I had great parents, but it's like, to me, your parents are like the epitome of jujitsu, like art. You know, jujitsu is art and science,
Huh.
softly and gently, like look up the etymological roots of jujitsu and judo,
Okay.
push and pull. And so, the next question is sort of like, what was the tipping point for you to pursue writing and filmmaking? I mean, you do a lot. You do songwriter,
Yeah.
just writing entails a lot for you.
Yeah.
Filmmaking, especially like documentary experimental filmmaking.
Yeah.
So where was that tipping point? Because I'm sure your parents are exposing you to art and literature growing up. and you're seeing all this, and then at some point you go, that's what I want to do. Like you've already said it in a way, going into
Yeah.
the family business,
Right. Exactly.
academia. But it's
Yeah.
sort of like there's something like, well, no, I want to go be something, I want to be a coder or,
Yeah.
write code. So where was that tipping point for you? Like, what did you study in college specifically? And is that, yeah.
Yeah, my undergrad's in media communication studies, which, we read Adorno, McLuhan, et cetera, and talked through that stuff, and that was worthwhile. I've always been drawn to creating art, as early as I can remember, like in one way or another. As far as it being something that I would do, I mean, I think that it's complicated because it's like you have to sort of choose a career, right, in this world, and I think that's a hard thing with art. And I think part of what appeals to me about academia is that it's a career that doesn't it's a career that at least offers the possibility of not stifling the artistic impulse over much, right? That I think a big part of what I've taken from my mom is her ability to like take on a fairly substantive course load and still make time for, independent creation. Although that wasn't necessarily the case when we were little kids. But yeah, there wasn't necessarily a tipping point, in the sense of it was more like the tipping point was I've known always that I want to make art. And eventually I sort of was like, okay, let me get real and like think of a way that I'm actually going to be able to make art without make art and feed myself,
Yeah.
right? And make art and feed myself in a way that doesn't rely on the art, but that isn't separate from it,
Yeah.
right? And that's a very hard needle to thread. And because there was this model from my parents, that was something that I think makes a lot of sense. And I'm,
Yeah.
very early in my career, so we'll see.
Yeah. It's like the typical thing. You got to have something to fall back on.
Right.
This joke I tell people, parents like your age don't laugh, and people my age or your parents' age do laugh. They go, the kid goes up to the parent and goes, "Are you absolutely sure you won't support me for the rest of my life?"
Right.
Younger parents go, "That's not funny." Because, our generation, we're like, hey, we're out of here, man. We don't need our parents. We can just go and do it. But, there's a lot more things like student debt and blah, blah,
Oh
blah.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so a screenwriting teacher told me great art or great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What what role
Kubrick
does
said that. That's so interesting.
yeah,
I would
well,
never expect Kubrick to say that. That's very
yeah, well,
interesting.
these guys are shysters. Anyways, what role does intention play in your creative process? So it sort of plays off of what you just talked about.
Yeah.
I'm saying, like, when you write, you're writing a song during COVID.
Yeah.
You sit down on the piano and you write lyrics in the melody. What role does intention play when you're writing something not for
Yeah.
assignments? Like you're writing for your newsletter about
Right.
the New Yorker. That's sort of, focus. But I'm saying just when you're free to do
Yeah.
a piece of Sam Circle art, what role does intention play?
Well, intention, it's interesting. I think that constraint is an important word. And like I'm very interested in, I think my dad loves to say this, that, and I forget who originally said this, but oh, I know. Do you know the thinker and the professor, Greg Ulmer, University of Florida?
Oh yeah, I
Okay.
learned about him about an hour ago, learning
Oh,
about your dad. Yeah,
okay, yeah, learning about my dad. Okay, you've done your research. Yeah, Ulmer would say, among other things, he would talk about constraints as the breeding ground of creativity,
yeah,
which is a very, I think that's a very true idea, and I personally am very interested in, if you can come up with the constraint, it allows that intention to flow, because I think otherwise there's so many imposed frames and imposed frameworks, and it without a constraint, you end up just making something out of sort of these imposed frames and frameworks. The work is not as interesting. So for example, my songwriting during quarantine, usually what I would do is I would come up with what I would call a loaded phrase. So like one of the songs, I was thinking about the phrase good grief. And I was like, oh, well, the opposite of good grief would be bad joy. So then I wrote this chorus that goes, bad joy, good grief. And then I was like, what rhymes with that? So I think the next line is, when the paint starts peeling from the walls and ceiling and throws everything into relief. I don't know, it sounds better but it's like just coming up with rhymes and stuff, but always sort of going back to what can I tie to that sort of loaded phrase at the center is a helpful constraint. And that's usually how I write what I call pop songs, although there are all sorts of genres. I've also done some musical theater writing, and in that case, it's more about what happens in this scene and how do I get this song to get us from point A to point B in a way that still accommodates a chorus, or accommodates, what I mean, a tune.
Yeah. Really good, Sam. It evoked two lines. One line is, I avoid cliches like the plague. And the other one is, McLuhan wrote a book, From Cliche to Archetype. So that's what you're taking good grief and you're turning it into an archetypical thing.
Yeah.
So that was really good. He also talks about everything we invent extends some humanness, like knife and fork extend our teeth. The shutter in a camera projector is an extension of the eyelid.
Yeah.
Even non-tangible, like religion or philosophies, might be an extension of consciousness.
Yeah.
What does the moving image camera, whether it's film or video, what does it extend for you? What humanness does the...
Yeah, I think it extends the capital I. I think it extends the I, but the I, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'll let that pun sit as my answer.
That is really good, because I like McLuhan said it extends the foot because you're
right. I've heard that. That is, yeah.
So Peter Greenaway said cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. Our experimental things a different way or doing something completely different. Like if me and you watch Tony Conrad's The Flicker, it's just black and white frames flickering off and on. We might have a story go through our head, but it's not storytelling per se.
Yeah. So I've thought about this a lot. Narrative is something I've thought about a lot, and I helped create a course on narrative because it's something that I think it gets. I don't know. I think people are very quick to dismiss it, and in fact, having an understanding of narrative can be really powerful when you're making experimental work. But what I like to say, and I'm sure other people have said this, but that narrative is rhythm, right? And maybe narrative is a rhythm. But just like with rhythm, you can syncopate it, but if you don't play in the rhythm, then you're not right. It's not rhythmic. It's there's no meaning, like there's not a set point when rhythm breaks down. But when you listen to something, you can tell this is rhythmic or this is non-rhythmic. And similarly, I think that there is no set point where narrative breaks down. But yeah, and then the reason I like thinking about it that way also is that it allows for the possibility of other ways of marking time, right? Or other ways of matching a beat, right? Other than rhythm. And I think that there's a lot of possibility there, but I think getting stuck in everything has to be rhythmic or everything has to be non-rhythmic or believing that better because you are rhythmic or non-rhythmic. You know, I'm sure you get that in music too, but I don't know. I see it as a little short-sighted.
No, it's good. It reminded me of Frank Zappa calling his Hot Rats album a movie for your ears, because rhythm is usually thought of more in music. There's a big rhythm. In fact, Andrew Noren really nailed my question down, because he says if you put one frame next to another frame, that is narrative. It doesn't matter if it's gobbledygooky, you know, abstract, whatever.
Well, right. What I would say is that's a beat, right?
Yeah.
That's which is not in and of itself necessarily rhythm. It's not in and of itself narrative, but they're directly related. They're directly correlated.
Yeah, it's Kubelka. In fact, Hollis Frampton said narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. And you forget to die.
Did you said this? I remember you saying that.
I asked that to whatever, that guy who did that great performance piece. Jeremy.
Yeah, I liked the answer there.
That was pure Ann Arbor Film Festival, by the way. We had 40 years of more performance art before shows, and that one was pure Ann Arbor Film Festival. That was beautiful.
That was really great, and I loved the answer that he gave to that question. I can't.
He said that heaven is starting something and finishing it.
Yes.
That was an amazing question. I mean, amazing answer. After you answered, I'll tell you, because what people say. But anyways, just your hunch. Can you forget to die?
I think that I'm inclined to say that you can forget anything, but I don't think that will influence much.
Very good. Well, it's funny because all words are metaphoric. So the question is metaphoric. So a lot of people look at me when I ask that question, they go, what do you mean? They freak out.
Right.
And they're like, you know, and I go, well, you can take it literally or metaphorical.
Yeah.
But a lot of people like Steve Anker, a pioneer of experimental film, yesterday said, yes. I goes, dude, that's amazing. You said, yeah, because you can't, I mean, it's a tricky one. So really good. So, if me and you were starting the Ann Arbor Film Festival 61 years ago, should it be more inclusive or more exclusive? I know there's animations and there's experimental and there's narrative, but there's not like, we're not mixing it up. So I talked to Chick Strand about this when she was starting Canyon Cinema with Bruce Bailey, same time. She said, we were trying to recreate our 11-cent movie-going experience with a newsreel and a cartoon and then an experimental film.
Yeah.
And Brackage came along and says, no, don't show that other stuff. Just show experimental films. So should we be more inclusive or more exclusive?
You know, I think there's something to be said for I really love what the Ann Arbor Film Festival is, and I think it does such a good job of celebrating that kind of thing. I would say that I hope that the wheels always turn slowly in the direction of inclusivity. That there is a gradual sort of slow turn toward more and more inclusive ways of making. You know, I think there's something very interesting. Who was it? There was somebody that was doing that. I saw something at MoMA that was like it was he did a long series of these, and it was a long time ago, and it was rebroadcasting this, but it was sort of what you're talking about. There was newsreels, and there was totally out there experimental stuff, and there was, you know, just like it was like you had just taken whatever you had in the film canisters and played them one after the other. And it is very interesting to engage in that kind of looking. But I think that the risk you run, you want to make sure to hold on to a sense of community, and that can dissipate it with if there's so much inclusivity that there's no sense of, well, this is why we are a group, right? This is why we are gathered here today.
Yeah.
That can be a problem. And
Mm.
so I think you want to expand the boundary slowly so as to like beckon more and more people in, but keep the boundary. I don't know. That's my hunch.
Really, really well put. In fact, Steve Anker, if you haven't checked his book, Radical Light, it's amazing. The history of San Francisco experimental film. Yesterday, he said, experimental is not a genre. And I was like,
Right.
oh my God,
Right.
I've never
method.
heard that
Yeah.
line. But I think who you might have been referring to is Christian Marclay. You know, the guy who made.
No, I love Christian Marclay. It
Yeah.
wasn't
It's
Christian
not
Marclay.
him, yeah. But
No,
anyways,
I'll figure it out.
yeah, let me know. But it is the real hidden question here, Sam, is what's the services and disservices of marginalizing experimental film? Jackson Pollock was on the cover of Life magazine in 1949. Regular people could start developing an aesthetic on experimental painting. There were no Bruce Conner or Mayan Darren Life magazine covers. Generally, this is biased too of many. Generally, it's privileged, entitled, I call them rich art kids who develop an avant-garde aesthetic and dominate the experimental film world. Any comment? Sorry.
No, that's all right. You know, I don't know. I think that I think it's a valid point to make, but I also think that it's a lot of privileged, whatever you said, and also sort of boring kids that are going to be running Hollywood. And so I don't think that I don't think that the issue, I think the issue, right, is like, oh, those are the people given opportunities. That's too bad. There's ways to fix that, but I see it as a little bit verging on anti-intellectualism to say that like only those people would like approach the avant-garde. I really think anyone that is exposed to the avant-garde can develop an appreciation for it.
Yeah. What was the motive of the cave artist?
Well, I love that idea about cave art that I saw, that there was a research paper, something about that when it's lit by cave light and firelight and natural light, it has a natural flickering effect, and it can create a sense of motion. And that's incredible and really like revelatory. And in fact, when I saw, did you see at Ann Arbor the one that was I don't understand how it worked, but it was lit by a candle, and then somehow some process which I don't quite get, but that reminded me when I was watching that, I was like, oh my God, like this must be what it was like to be in a cave watching the cave light light these images up. This is incredible. And so that was super cool. And so you can't know, but if that's on offer, if the scientists say that's a possibility, I'm going to take that, because that's a super cool idea.
Well, that was the Ottawa guy who was on my panel. I like it because, that was cool. I like when people mess with the projector tool, you know. And that was good. But it's funny because going back to New Yorker, I mean, what you described is the New Yorker article on cave art that Herzog used as the basis for his film.
Oh, right. The Encounters at the End of the World. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's Shadows of Forgotten Dreams.
Oh, you're right. Yes. Thank you.
I'm
bad with names, which can be like, it's hard. It's like, oh, I want to have everything at the tip of my tongue.
No. One of my dear friends in Ann Arbor said, have you ever wondered how much Rolodex space of your mind you waste just memorizing movie star names? It's like, we have to, or anything, artists' names, writers' names.
Yeah.
We waste all this space just memorizing their names. What about the ideas?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I resonate with that. Yeah.
What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Oh, that's a good one. Gosh. I think that I think you need to have compromise with your collaborators, conviction against everyone else, and the wisdom to know which is which.
Very good. You've accomplished a lot. Rate these three elements. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Okay.
Luck, skill, and ambition.
Um, it's tricky. I think those things are seen as being in some way equal, or like all the same kind of force, but they're not the same kind of force. I think that um ambition can be a skill, and I think that uh maybe maybe a little bit of an overvalued skill sometimes. um I also think that luck is often a matter of putting yourself in the way of good, as people say. um but I do think that that is very important, that you show up and that you sort of do your best to kind of be in the place where, where whatever is going to happen, which is easier said than done, because you never know, like, you don't know where the place is until
Yeah.
it's 2 weeks later, or 2 years later, or 2 decades later. Um, yeah, so it's that's a hard one to rank. But I think I would put, you know, I see ambition as its own beast, and not, I think there's certainly a place for that in artists, but I don't think there's a lot of a place for that in art. I think you have to kind of try to keep that away from your art. So I would put the other two tied for number one.
That is so good. Because there's a great line. Gary Player, the golfer, says, "The more you practice, the luckier you get."
Yeah.
And my question used to be, is ambition based more on fear or joy? And then people would always say fear. And
Right.
so I read William Friedkin, the Exorcist director, and he says, in Hollywood, gifts have nothing to do with it. It's all ambition.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was like really funny. So then I threw the three in, and some people go, well, I'll add a fourth, the necessity or whatever.
Right.
So a poet said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is inner dialogue in?
I think a lot of the time it comes out as poetry. You
Yeah.
know, I often feel that when I work in other mediums, that I have to take the poetic language that comes somewhat naturally and twist it to whatever is at hand. Um, and it's not just the poetic language, it's also like the poetic, like the sort of the idea that every word is another opportunity for play,
Yeah.
and um that comes pretty naturally. And I think it's sort of like you can have that be a tool that you use, or you can have it sort of overwhelm the picture, and that's like poetry. Like, you can have it guide the sight line, like the word itself. um yeah, I'm not sure.
Pretty good aphorism, Sam. I'm going to use it. Every word is an opportunity for play.
Mm,
That's a great line. But Gary Snyder, you evoke Gary Snyder. He said, my task as a poet entails the work of seeing the world without language than putting that seeing into language. So Bersani did a study of Mallarmé, the symbolist, and I'm always curious what this means. I don't know, but I'm curious if you can figure it out. The very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition. So there's a few hard, I mean, they're little difficult words. It doesn't have to be crises, but the very crises which threatens, it doesn't have to be threatens, like the writing of poetry. So the something of poetry sustains poetic composition.
Yeah. No, I mean, there were some tweets on Twitter a while ago that sort of went viral negatively, but that I thought were smart and interesting. Basically saying, you know, poetry doesn't do anything, right? Poetry doesn't. There's not sort of a. It lacks any kind of impact in the current. There's like it goes unread. It's widely hated. People often, the thing that people hate the most is like the thing that they hate that they don't even know that they hate, and like that is poetry. That's like a huge, like, really, our culture has no place for it. You know, and I think there's a lot of truth to that, and I think it's too bad. But you know, I don't know. I don't know that you ought to let that kind of thought affect your individual process of creation.
Well, that's the
Yeah,
similarity between poetry and experimental film. You're not going to make
true,
you're
yeah.
not going to make your living doing it, but you know, it's sort of like one of the last bastions. You're free to do whatever you want, you know.
Yeah.
But they still reject my films in Ann Arbor. So what can I say? So back to Ann Arbor, George Manupelli, his mantra is ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression. And the jazz pianist Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
Well, I think that the self is a vehicle, and so I think those are inextricable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you can pull it apart.
Can art making be egoless?
I think that art making is a very powerful tool toward the dissolution of the ego in many respects. But I'm you know, I'm not sure anything can be egoless. Yeah, I think it's always there.
Is perception reality?
I don't know. Okay, they should have sent a postmodernist, which maybe I am. I don't know. Is perception reality? Yeah. I I don't think that I don't think the converse is true, right? I don't think that um there's this sort of, you know, innate real space necessarily. Um but I think there's more to it than perception alone.
Yeah, that's good, Sam. I appreciate this. Lily Tomlin said, "Reality's just a collective hunch."
Mm.
But you know, back to McLuhan, he probed Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, saying, "Artists dream awake," and not to sound elitist, but everybody has this amazing capacity to create these scenarios while they sleep. But the artists also do it while they're awake; they dream awake. Have dreams played a role in your creative process?
Mm. Yeah, but not in a very literal way. Um dreams to some extent. I think to a large extent also, it's amazing how just the act of like sitting down in a theater and the lights go down and the first 5 seconds of the movie play, and all of a sudden I have like multiple thoughts pop into my head, and I have to like, try to either keep them in my head or like jot them down, or like there's just something about that that's so incredibly creatively fertile. And I think it's like it's this sort of waking dream. The theatrical space is this sort of, it has that element to it. So that's what I'll say.
Let's just dabble in music for a second here. I
Yeah.
appreciate it, Sam. My friend says the 3 T's of music are taste, technique, and theory. So you've learned how to play the piano, technique, the theory, chords. How does one acquire taste?
Yeah, I mean, I think you acquire taste through through training the ear, consumption, listening, and also, it's tricky because I think that artists don't think the way that critics think, but I do think that artists can gain from reading critical approaches, right? Reading critics, looking at art and thinking about art, that can then inflect the way that they create, but not in the literal sense of that they're tailoring their work toward critics, but just in the sense that it 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 enables you to envision an outside eye, which I'm sure that there's plenty of artists that don't want to do that, and that's I think fine. But I think it can be a useful tool. I'm not ready to reject it. Yeah, I think that I I almost feel like taste is where the other two break down. And so often what is hard is that people think that it'll be a very natural process, that they'll just sort of go, okay, first I'll learn technique, and then I'll learn blah, 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 and then I'll learn taste. And in fact, in order to learn taste, you have to let go of a lot of the other two some of the time. Yeah.
In fact, McLuhan said song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. Any comment? And I'll read it again if you want.
No, I got it. Yeah. There's a guy on YouTube, Adam Neely, that does very interesting music theory stuff. And he's talked about some of the differences between, that so much music theory is taught from the perspective of this very particular set of like these European composers working in a very specific context in a very specific point in time, and that other music like Indian raga or whatever has like these massive differences in terms of basic elements of its structure and conception and what it's going for. I don't know though. For some reason, I'm hesitant to think that it comes from language. I almost feel like maybe language comes from music. I don't know. I think about the ways in which people that have lost language, like stroke victims, are often able to sing or express themselves in that way. That's maybe sort of a pat example, but I think that I don't know. When I make music, it does not feel to me like it comes from that same place. And I say this as someone whose music is very literate and very words driven and very close in theory to that space. But it's super different for me. And like my songwriting process and my poem writing process, it feels physically like they're pulling from completely different parts of my brain. So I'm not sure.
What's more fundamental, language or music?
Yeah, no, fundamental is an interesting word. But yeah, no, I do think music, but I think yeah, I think that both exist in the sphere of the other in ways that are not they're all tangled up together, kind of. But yeah.
I loved your critic thing. That helped me a lot. And it's funny because Ben Ratliff wrote a book on Bill Frisell, and he said, I mean sound as it has long functioned among jazz players as a mystical term of art, as in every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality,
Mm,
such that it can be heard at best in a single note. So me and you could
mm,
hear Miles Davis and we go, that's Miles, in a couple notes. And he said, Miles is fragile and pointed. So he talks like two words.
yeah.
John Coltrane, slightly undercooked and urgent. If a music writer that you really respect was going to describe Sam sound, what two words would you go, he got it, or they got it?
Gosh, I really think of myself um mostly as a songwriter, and I
Well,
I
I
like
mean, just you as the songwriter, what two words
no,
would
I know,
you?
but what I'm saying is I can perform my songs, but I don't necessarily view my sound as quite baked yet, or like quite fully
Right.
developed. I think it's something I'm still working on. Um, so my songwriting, I think I want it to be, I don't know, witty and reverberant or something, but it's much harder to pin words to songwriting. I think a
Yeah.
sound, there's so much it's a much juicier exercise, and I don't know that I'm ready to pin words to my sound. I think it's a little underdeveloped. Yeah.
Thank you. Tell me one major element of your creativeness that's in all your
Yeah.
pursuits that stayed the same in the years you've been doing it, and one major element that's changed.
Hmm. Um, I think that I it's interesting how a lot of the similarities are things that I think at the time I would have said, "Well, no, not really." Like I think a lot of my work um has an interest in um like mm, I'm not very interested in what I would call world building in any of its forms. I'm more interested in looking at the psyche in the world, you know what I mean? And
No.
I think I have to remember, like, oh, build the world out, whatever that may mean, you know what I mean? Um, it does that part doesn't it does it's not where the joy is, and so maybe part of it is coming up with, constraints where, I mean, part of it I think is making documentary where it's sort of like it's our world, and the whatever version of our world it is, it that can come naturally, and you can edit for other things. Yeah, I don't know, something that has changed. I mean, so much changes between I do these big projects in undergrad and college. I wrote and staged a full length 3 hour long musical with a cast of like 30 people. And that was the hardest thing I have ever done. And it was wild. And I mean, I look back at that and I'm sort of like, whoa, like, but it's weird also. Like, it's not the show that I would make now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's an interesting show. It's much more concerned with, I don't know. I wrote it over such a long time that I had an extremely complex, like, undergirding framework that I was sort of desperate that it not be too visible. And so I feel like that's straining to, like, keep the audience from sort of looking at all this complex undergirding is very visible, but maybe in a compelling way. Yeah, that was an interesting project. So I think what has changed is, um, uh, like, what's changed is everything, and what's stayed the same is, like, the canvas. You know what I mean? What's changed is the paint. I don't know. I've overthought it, I guess.
No, it's good. In fact, I think we have a similarity because my main pursuit is studying the hidden psychic effects.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know how the internet's changed us. We just
Yeah.
embrace it, you know, and in Zoom is huge for me because I did live events for 40 years. And now I just literally tell people my Zooms are better than my live events. And they're going, no, when are you going to do live events again? And I'm like, well, but that's funny because you have this quote. Is it on the bottom of your emails? If being
Oh yeah.
who GPT-2, what is that?
Yeah.
Who wrote that quote?
That's a computer. So that's GPT. Now it's OpenAI who does, you know what I mean, all that AI stuff. But that's from an article very early on. You know, now it's like every single article does that. And they were trying to make a poem in the style of, I think, Auden. And it came up with that line. And when I read that line in the article, I was like, wow, it's incredibly profound, but it's also like, it's like the more that you look into it, it sort of has this kind of infinite and unresolvable quality to it. This sort of almost like a blur that I thought was compelling. And I thought it was sort of funny to have a quote that's written by AI. You know, now I feel like it's sort of corny. I mean, it was years and years ago that I put that in the bottom of my email.
Really? Years ago? No, I mean, I was blown away because you explaining it's Auden. I use this Auden quote all the time, but I sort of hijacked his quote and I say it in my own words, and it might not be exactly what I'll send you both the way he said it and the way I say it, but it basically is the mystery of art is that we don't know if it activates or pacifies us. So that's the beauty of art is we think, oh, it's going to make me do something. Well, no, if it makes you trance out, that could be good too. But you know, we like Breck says, I want art that, you know, motivates or activates us. But, you know, trance art you can have epiphanies in trance art too.
Yeah.
So Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I think that it's definitely a resonant idea. It's hard to sort of come up with an example. You know, I think that my relationship to the social world is not like, there's a lot of anxiety there and a lot of discomfort there. And to some extent, the reason why I think that's so fascinating to probe in my art is that it allows me to, you know, it's something that matters deeply to me, but it's also something where I often feel like, oh, like I you know, I have a hard time with that, right? Or it doesn't necessarily, I'm not like a natural, but I think that in some ways you could look at me and be like, well, that's ridiculous because, you know, I don't know, I can talk intelligently, but that's not actually a big part of this, like what social interaction takes. And so I guess that would be a weakness. It would at least be a weakness that has become it's become artistically fruitful, which I think is sort of what the question was maybe getting at.
Yeah, no, it is. You know what you reminded me of at the Ann Arbor Film Festival was me, because every time they go, okay, Q&A, your arm would shoot up and you'd give them this sort of not difficult question, but it's not just like namby-pamby question.
Yeah, I wanted to give something that the filmmaker could really talk about. And what my trick is, I always try to come up with a dichotomy
Yeah.
because that allows people to,
Yep.
they can very easily choose one side or the other, or they can sort of give the answer of, oh, well, it's complicated, and then give a story related to that. But
Yeah.
I think those are
No,
often the
that's
best.
in for years I've done this, and they literally look, and as soon as I shoot my arm up, they look the other way and go, I'm not fucking calling on Jerry again. He'll ask. And one time this big hotshot person goes, Jerry, I gotta go to the bar and have a drink. I says, give me a break. You gotta, But anyways, I want to propose some projects to do with you because I found it intriguing. I asked my friend who wrote comedy with Robin Williams, can satire be destructive? And he says, that's the job of satire. Now, if me or you do a cartoon in a certain country and they kill us, some people think dying is destructive. But Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. And Frank Zappa says it so well in a song. He says, watch the Nazis run your town. Now go home and check yourself. You think we're singing about somebody else.
Right.
What's the function of satire?
Yeah. I mean, I think those quotes can speak to it. I think it has to do with, it's like, for some reason, what's coming to my mind to say is that it's like a convex mirror. Which then, do you know that Ashbery poem? Have you read that Self-Portrait in a Convex Mirror, John Ashbery?
I will look it up,
Oh,
please.
that's one of the great. It's a very long poem, and it's an interesting one because it Ashbery wrote that, and then almost all the poetry he wrote from then on was very um very difficult to decode. And convex mirror is not easy. It's quite dense. It's very long, but it's written in language that feels at least like sort of natural, like one thought follows the next. But when you read that poem and then you read his later work, you can sort of understand what he's doing in a fascinating way. And so like that poem is almost like this key to the rest of his work
Yeah.
in a really yeah, Ashbery is one of the greats for sure. Not a hot take.
I really appreciate that. I'll look into that,
Yeah.
Sam. There's a line that goes, well, we got about 8 more minutes. Can you go a little longer, or you got to go in 8?
I can go a little bit longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. That gives me an idea. There's a line that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait morphed it into you are what you hate. In fact, James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve.
Yeah.
And Louis Buñuel nailed it. Thank God I'm an atheist.
Right.
So this line, you create what you resist, not you, Sam, but one creates
Right.
what you resist. Any thoughts on that line?
Well, I mean, I think it's very directly, it's that second quote that you said is like almost another way of saying what I was trying to say earlier, in the sense of like culture reiterates what it suppresses or what it
Yeah.
compartmentalizes. I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think it's true on the macro level, and to some extent on the micro level. I think that, on the level of the individual, there's stuff that we can do to, to make ourselves aware of that. And that is a harder task on the level of a society. I think there's some people with some smart ideas on how to do it on the level of a society, but it's daunting. Yeah.
Daunting. These are 5 quick Alan Watts questions just off the top of your head in a few words.
Okay.
1, who started it all?
Probably not a who.
Are we going to make it?
Somebody's going to make something.
Where do we put it?
Put it wherever it doesn't go.
Who's cleaning it up?
Whoever put it where it doesn't go.
5, is it serious?
I think that there's the most profoundly serious things are the silliest things.
Dude, that is so. That's my Pixel Vision Film Festival's
Yeah.
33 years old, and one person came up after the screening once and said, "Oh, I get it. You're using a kid's toy camera, and if you're playful, it comes off as possibly profound. But if you try to make something profound, it doesn't work."
Right.
So it's really funny. How do you find peace of mind?
I think I often think about the idea of you have to recommit to the present constantly. You have to every moment you can just say, I am recommitting to the present. Because there's so much pulling us to other temporal spaces, which can be enjoyable and interesting, but doesn't bring peace of mind. I think peace of mind resides in, yeah, recommitting. Yeah.
Really great words. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Gosh. I feel like I would say something like, you know, you're the the things that you're the most sure about, you're pretty wrong on, but everything that you are not sure about, you should have a little more faith in because you're onto something.
It's good. It's wise words, Sam. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll? Over or under?
Over. Yeah.
Why?
Because
Why?
under, I feel like it depending on your toilet paper dispenser. I mean, with ours, it would be up against the wall. I feel like I don't want my toilet paper touching the wall. Yeah.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
We often say, "Oh, that's the title for the memoir," in my family. Whenever there's like a funny phrase that somebody says, but I don't know if I have a good one off the top of my head. I'm obsessed with the word set, so I think it would just be set because all my projects I try to have that word in there.
Wait, S-E-T or S-E-X?
S-E-T. S-E-T.
S-E-T.
No,
Set.
not set.
I like
Yeah.
that.
It's
That's
the
a great
greatest
word.
word. I think I read somewhere that it's the word with the most meanings in the English language, like a very long time ago, and it sort of got in my head from that. But it's just an incredible resonant word, and it because it has so much meaning, it also is sort of this like this atom that sort of rejects meaning. It's like it just is itself, and like I don't know, there's a real beauty in that. Yeah, so I
Yeah,
love the word set.
I study etymology and I can't wait to look it up, but it's the great line, words evoke more than their meaning.
Yeah,
That's a great word for that.
yeah.
They want to scent the glue in the binding of your autobiography. What smell?
Gosh, it's nice of them to let me choose. I don't know many publishing houses that let you pick that. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think I just have it smell like bookbinding
Book
material.
by
Yeah,
No, you'll love this. You know where I got it? Is
yeah.
Madonna had her glue
Oh,
scented with patchouli.
and that book was called Sex, wasn't it? So there we go.
That's funny. Okay,
Yeah.
if a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure I want a statue to be displayed in my honor. I think I would have it be made of something biodegradable and placed somewhere where not too many people go. Like I would commission Andy Goldsworthy.
Oh, nice. I like Andy.
Yeah.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Ooh, wow. Something good you never had and you never want. Wow. It's like a great one to come up with profound answers to, but it's a hard one to answer on the fly. Um, yeah, golly, something good. It's like almost like a half a riddle, you know.
Yes.
Um, I guess I never have and I never want to um like to create a work of art and go, I've said all that I wanted, I said
Yeah.
all that I intended to say. Maybe that's a little pat, but there we go.
No, that's excellent. You know, the three answers I get the most
Yeah.
are money, fame, and heroin.
Ha, ha.
But you know when Mike Kelly said kids, children.
Mm.
That's it says a lot. Anyways, if you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I would take a bag of shit to the face.
Couple more and we're out of here, Sam. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yeah.
What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Hmm. I I think that as much harm as it's done, that we all have these cameras on us all the time, it's also done a lot of great stuff, especially for art, that we're walking around with these, pretty excellent little cameras. Um, and I think that there's some really interesting places to take that people are gonna, take that. So I'll just say that.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
Joseph Boyce said, make the secrets productive. Thornton
Mm,
Wilder said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But
mm,
art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time.
mm.
Sam, you laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Yeah. What's it really all about? Um, I think I'm interested in the idea of recursion and the idea that um this sort of like eternal return, or this like that everything has this sort of um spiraling nature where um you you get back to the same things by moving away from them, or by not allowing them. And there's something very interesting there, and I think that art can uh reiterate that process, or maybe like create a simulacrum of that process, or something
Right.
in interesting ways.
Super cool. You know, in studying Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, it always goes back to Dante and Vico. And Vico's,
Yeah,
fourth step is the return.
yeah,
But I used to ask this question: is human progress cyclical or cumulative?
yeah,
And it's sort of like what it is what you described.
right,
It's a cone that goes in circles, but sometimes it spirals up and sometimes it spirals down.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, well, Dante always makes me think about this story my mom tells. This is a really a silly, silly story, but she was riding in a car with a very famous Italian academic, and he said, sometimes I lose all hope. These children I teach, they haven't even heard of Dinty. And my mom goes, "Oh my God, I haven't heard of Dinty. who the hell is Dinty? And much later figured out that he was saying Dante in his very, very thick accent. But she was mortified. She's like, oh my God, I got to figure out who Dinty is. So, yeah.
That is funny. That's what I always say. I know how to mispronunciate correctly because
Right.
I got a good education
Right.
right there at University of Michigan.
Nice.
So before I ask you the last question, I just want to put in a bonus because it's intriguing. How has your you've developed this sense of what art is? You know, my friend, I want you to come to Venice, California sometime. And this guy's been a street urchin for 40 years and he's the best artist in Venice. He's like a cross between R. Crumb and Salvador Dali and Lenny Bruce. And it's amazing.
Wow.
Doug, in my line that I love to repeat by him is art isn't. And that's an amazing, like two words. But how has your sort of, I don't know if you want to call it pursuit, your practice of art, your learning of art shaped your behavior? Or just how has art shaped your behavior?
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it gets back to that triangle of like thoughts, feelings, actions a little bit, where everything is sort of up against everything else. Everything is touching everything else. And it's hard to sort of disentangle cause and effect, because the concern is that you're looking at it all backward, that almost anything you say, it's easy to say, well, no, in fact, that was your behavior shaping your art, right? And so I think both are true. You know, I think that the I, and the I, like it really opens up the world to view things with a creative eye. And yeah, I think that is what art enables in the self.
Yeah, again, words evoke more in their meaning and how you spell them. That's, you know, I made a film called I Am Not a Robot. And then I Googled it and it was like all over. I was like, well, I don't want to name a word. So I just spelled I with EYE.
Right.
So then it changed the whole film as I Am Not a Robot. So, but what you just described is really the essence of McLuhan, because his whole thing was causality, cause and effect, content and form. And what he talked about was the resonating interval, the in-betweenness. He said the gap is where the action is, you know, like you say, it's not one or the other. It's like that vibrating, you know, corpus callosum in the middle. Like,
yeah.
What gives you the most optimism?
Gosh, what did I say to the first question? Love, air, water.
And water.
Yeah.
That's good. Listen, it's funny you did that, because the way this is structured is the first question is, what's the best thing for you? Got good recall, dude. The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being? Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being. And the last question is, what gives you the most optimism, is what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he said, other people.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's truly been a pleasure spending this time with another person. Sam, thank you so much.
Brilliant.
Truly enlightening. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks again.